I'm going to repurpose this small table that my friend gave me before she moved. This table's about 14 inches long by 6 inches wide, and it's definitely seen better days. You can tell it's got a few layers of paint. The goal is to strip it down to the wood and modernize it by cutting off the wavy edges. I started by removing all the brackets. Well, trying to. At the time, I had no idea what I was in for. Because this table has a few layers of paint and thick layers, some of these brackets were actually pretty hard to remove. I worked on removing these brackets for about an hour, and then I was like, okay, you know what? I need to move on to try to remove this shelf. I actually thought taking this shelf off would be easy, but clearly it was not. I struggled. I couldn't figure out how to remove this shelf. That's when I realized there were actually more screws holding it in place that were hiding under the thick layers of paint, and they were not budging. At this point, I just really needed a win because I was too far into the project to give up. The screws were off, the table wasn't steady. Either I forced the shelves to come off or I just cut them off and just tossed this table. There were still lots of screws left to remove, and I am no quitter. So I powered through and with a little force was finally able to pull everything apart. There were also quite a few nails in the top piece, so I worked on removing those before heading over to the miter saw to square off the edges. I will say, since this table was wavy, I had to use an L square to make sure I was cutting straight lines. It probably would have been easier if I would have taken this to the table saw, but you live, you learn. It turned out okay. Now, some of the heads from a few screws broke off while I was taking the table apart, so I worked on removing the rest of the screws stuck in this wood. I did so by using a 1/4-inch diamond hole saw to drill around the screw, and then use the chuck of my drill to grab onto said screw and remove it. The legs were pretty damaged, so I chose to get rid of them and replace them with closet rod I had in my garage from a previous project. I just felt like I had already put so much time into taking this table apart that I didn't want to spend more time repairing and filling. I gave everything a good sand and then worked on putting the table back together. The original legs were attached by brackets and screws, so I found these little corner brackets at Lowe's and decided to use them to attach the legs. One of the biggest challenges I faced when reassembling this table was trying to get all the brackets on the legs evenly so that then the shelf would be level. I used a couple of empty boxes to prop the shelf up and then marked where I needed to drill holes in the legs to screw the bracket into that leg. I used a Forstner bit to create these recesses on the bottom of the tabletops where the legs could rest on, and for extra stability, I added 1x2s all around the bottom edges of the table, which I secured with wood screws. We made it to the final stages, finally, and after giving everything a good clean, I painted it using Dixie Belle chalk paint in the color Pinecone. Most of the furniture I flip, I try really hard not to buy any new paint or stain. This was also the case for this flip, so I decided to try a method I've done in the past, which is using chalk paint as a first layer and then using gel stain for the second layer. I had leftover Fusion Mineral Paint gel stain, so I went with that. I had only used this gel stain once before, but not over paint, so this was kind of an experiment. I sort of expected it to glide smoothly over the paint, but that wasn't the case. This gel stain is very thin and not very forgiving. What I do like about this gel stain though, in particular, is that it does have a top coat in it, so you don't have to add a top coat at the end. It's like an all-in-one, which if you're familiar with Fusion Mineral Paint, that's kind of what Fusion is known for, their all-in-one paints. I did one coat of the gel stain and waited 2 days for it to completely dry, and this is how it turned out. In the end, this little project took me a lot longer than I expected it to, but I'm still happy with how it turned out. This little table was transformed into something more modern, and I was able to do it with supplies I had on hand. I hope this little project inspires you to flip a piece of furniture before tossing it out. Everything has potential with a little love and a little paint. And apparently gel stain helps too, so I will link all the products I use below, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Till next time, happy DIYing!